Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode at East Oak Studio. We are so honored and excited about having a special guest here today, and Scott Jones. Scott is a fabulous patron to the arts and advocate for artists, especially even women artists around the country, and has really helped a lot of people in his career. He worked at Legacy Gallery for quite some time over in Scottsdale, and now runs and operates his own gallery up in Washington State. And he is here with us. We're going to be doing another lecture tomorrow on artist careers that we're going to be putting on the platform. But we also wanted to release something free so that everyone can ask questions about anything that pertains to the artist's life. Scott stays very closely in contact with a lot of artists around the country and goes all over the place, and we are only one stop on many, many stops that he's been creating, going all over the country, helping visiting artists and helping them around in their areas of the country. So without further ado, I want to thank you so much for coming, Scott.
I'm thrilled to be here.
I mean, this is exciting, y'all. Already this entire morning, we've had nothing but wonderful conversation and stories. So you're in for a real treat, and we're going to just kind of like go with the flow. I have a lot of dynamic questions, but at the same time, if we're just on some fun stories too, I'm just going to go with it, okay?
The one thing fun about art is there's always fun stories.
Yeah, isn't that the truth?
It's somebody buying a piece at the right time, from the right place, from the right artist. I get to see that all the time.
Yeah.
And the personalities involved in creating art and buying art it's fun watching them mesh and not mesh.
Yeah, no kidding. I think a lot of people would love to know kind of how you got in the art world, because I find that part very, very interesting when you told me several years ago. And what ignited the whole interest, because this is sort of a second career of yours.
It is, but it's also kind of a planned one too. Mm. I mean, I painted a lot of watercolors when I was a teenager. I had a really good mentor who was a very, very good watercolorist. He happened to be the dad of my best friend. And I know I spent a lot of time during summers going, do I want to play baseball or do I want to go paint? Mm. My friends could never understand that, why I would want to go paint with this, with this guy. And then I had a really good high school art teacher who just kind of let me have some confidence that another person in the world thought I was pretty good. And but as I went off to go to college, it just so happened that this mentor of mine was the dean of the art department that I chose to go to college at, Weber State. And I told him right up front, I'm not going to do art. I want to go get a business degree. I want to go make some money. But you'll know I'm retired. I remember this statement. You'll know I'm retired when I'm in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, selling art.
No kidding.
And I was 17 when I told him that.
Wow. And
so it was always in the back of my mind that when I grow up, I want to sell art. And I always thought it would be when I was 60, when I was 70, that the chance would come for me to do it. And but it all worked out. I ended up going and getting an MBA at Purdue University and ended up running a pretty decent sized business. Walmart was my biggest account. AutoZone was right up there. Did a lot of creative stuff, but cars and trucks. We did automotive accessories and I don't really like cars and trucks. It's not my thing, but we did create some pretty cool products. And I had the chance to grow a business into where all of a sudden I was feeding 700 families. And I found some real satisfaction in that.
Wow.
I had 200 plus employees in South Carolina, another 200 in Arizona, 200 in Ohio, 150 in Utah, and it really meant a lot. Every meeting with Walmart was oh my gosh, there's 100 people's jobs that depend on me keep growing this business, and the pressure was amazing. And but I And it did allow me to travel a lot, and I would go to art shows everywhere I went. I would schedule. I remember one time I was visiting Walmart up in Toronto, Walmart Canada, and Walmart Mexico called me. They were in Mexico City, and they said, we need you here for a meeting on Monday afternoon. And I'm thinking, how am I going to do that? Because the Prix de West is this weekend. And so I called my assistant and I said, I need you to book me a flight. I got to go to Mexico City, but somehow you got to get me through Oklahoma City on the way. And I had a job that allowed me to do those kind of things. And I treated myself to the Prix de West. I remember in the 1980s when I was promoted to vice president. I called my wife and I said, my gift to myself for being promoted is I'm going to go to Oklahoma City and go to this show. And I remember sitting at lunch just by myself. First time having been there, just in awe of the art and the artists. And somebody came up to my table and said, is it okay if we join you? And I looked up and it was Tom Lovell, John Clymer, and Howard Turpning, who sat down with me, this young whatever.
Yeah.
And we just had I just look back and go, wow, like been touched by the gods.
Yeah.
And I've had so many of those experiences.
Yeah.
And so art's just my life.
So why Scottsdale? Like, what inspired you, like, as a teenager to go, I want to be in Scottsdale?
Well,
were you in Western art? Or?
Well, what happened, the business I ran was in northern Utah, so Jackson Hole was just 3 hours away.
Right there. Okay.
But my tastes in art, I started collecting art. I was collecting watercolors because that's what I did. I bought my first watercolor painting when I was 15. And I remember when I was 14, I worked all summer at this horrible landscape job and made $500 and bought a rifle and a shotgun. And my parents were so proud of me because that's something they couldn't do. And my dad was a huge hunter. His life was hunting and fishing. And it was, way to go, son. We're so proud of you. And the next summer, I worked just as hard, made $550 and bought a incredible 36 by 48 watercolor painting.
Wow.
And my parents thought I had lost it. It's like, you worked all summer. And I remember telling them, but you were so happy with what I bought last year. And fast forward maybe 30 years. We're having Sunday dinner one time at my place, and we're all around the dining room table, and this painting's hanging up there. And I saw my mom's eyes go up to it, and then my dad followed her eyes, and then I followed them back and looked at them both, and I said, I wonder where that rifle and shotgun are at. And my mom just looked at me and she said, you knew since you were 15 what you were going to be doing. Yeah. And maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But when we sold the business, and my wife gave me about 36 hours after I was, as she put it, unemployed. And she said, what are we going to do? And I said, I think you know what we're going to do. And she says, I don't want to live in Jackson Hole. And I said, well, we'll keep the home here, but I don't think I want to go to Jackson Hole. But I'd been to Fredericksburg, and I'd been to Charleston, and I found Whitefish, Montana. And Whitefish just, to me, was just Jackson 20 years earlier. Yeah. I said, let's go to Whitefish, Montana, and I'll sell art. And that's what we did for a year. And I spent an entire year trying to buy a building to build a gallery. And nobody would sell me a building. This was in 2007, before the financial upheaval. Things were so good. Nobody would lease me a space, but I sold art out of a little space that's now, I think it's the bar of the Tupelo Grill. I mean, just a tiny little space, and we sold a lot of art. And I also sold a lot of really high-end Western art because I had been collecting it. And it was artists that did business with Legacy, did business with Trailside, who were looking for a means in Montana to sell their art in Montana. And so after a year, my wife was miserable. My daughter that was in high school was miserable. They wanted to go home to Utah. And I said, fine, I'll take another corporate job. And it just so happened a few of the Legacy artists called the owners of Legacy and said, don't let him go back into the corporate world. You guys should do something together. And I was literally a day away from signing a contract to run an import-export business out of Indonesia. And I just put that aside and decided, no, this is what I always wanted to do. And now all of a sudden I get to do something with with my favorite gallery.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just strange how it all happened.
Yeah.
But so I became the general manager of Legacy, and I would split my time between the Scottsdale Gallery and the Jackson Hole Gallery. And so I'd go to Scottsdale every winter, and then we do the auction, Scottsdale Art Auction, and then I'd go back to Jackson, and we still had a home in Utah that I'd see my wife when I could, and did that for years, and then basically talked with my wife about, we need to sell our Utah home. Where do you want to live? And she said, I'll live in Bozeman. So we actually opened a Legacy gallery in Bozeman. So then I was splitting my time 4 months
Wow.
between the three cities. But selling just, the best Western art from the best Western artists. And so that's my background.
Yeah.
But my interests, I don't know, it just kind of grew outside of Western art too.
Yeah.
I love challenging my artists to do, if you're a floral painter, don't just paint floral. If you're a landscape painter, don't just paint landscapes.
Yeah.
If you stretch yourself. If you paint wildlife, paint horses and then put riders on them. And I think the growth comes from doing things outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt that way with the gallery in Scottsdale. We had so much space, 17,000 square feet of space, that I started asking figurative artists to join the gallery, and floral artists and still lifes and street scene artists, and just things that they had never tried before, which just opened up a whole new appreciation, I guess, in my own soul of what good art is and what art can be. And all of a sudden, instead of working with 50 artists, I was working with 110 artists.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I just look back and think how fortunate that was, that I was able to do that. And so early on, I'm constantly out on Facebook at the time, looking for artists that I could give a shot in Scottsdale too.
Which was huge, because that was, 2008?
Yeah,
2009,
I mean, it was
and
really
Facebook was
early.
massive,
It
starting
was,
to get really big at that point.
Yep. And we still didn't even know what the internet, we knew what it was, but not the power of it, and not how pervasive it was going to come.
Yeah.
And then I learned, doing trips just like this, I started going, I went to the Academy of Art University one time in San Francisco. I have a daughter that's a photographer, and I said, fly down from Seattle to San Francisco. I'll meet you there, and we'll kind of do the Bay Area. But there's this show called the Spring Show that they do, and let's go see the artists that are studying there and the instructors. And I met Sun Yat Sen, who's this incredible San Francisco.
Yeah.
The street scenes just, he was only in his second year of school.
Yeah.
And he won the Best in Show at this little thing with this painting that I now own of 4 city buses and a night watchman. And I asked him to be in Legacy. Well, that made an impression on the Academy of Art. So every year they flew me out to critique portfolios. So every year I got to meet new artists.
Wow.
And it kind of paved the way that if I put the energy into it, I'm going to find some artists that might otherwise never even think of Legacy as a gallery that would be interested in them, because Legacy was just this top Western art gallery.
Yeah.
But and just got me so excited. So I, started going to ateliers. I started going to, universities that had good painting programs just to talk about the business of being an artist.
Yeah.
But part of it was just a little bit. I was a little bit greedy. I wanted to meet. I wanted to meet.
You wanted to be the discoverer.
I love discovering artists.
You like to find the diamond in the rough.
And in discovering an artist, it might not. They might be very successful in some little corner of, Cape Cod or something and doing well. But to me, it's how do we open the world to them?
Yeah.
And I've never stopped. It's just. I still do it. I still love going out and looking at both people who teach artists and people who are being taught by good artists, because the Scottsdale Artist School became a huge part of my life. And we did so many joint things between the gallery and the school that helped the school, helped the artists, and helped the gallery.
Let's pause right there real quick because I want to go into that more. But Tina, could you mute everything? I'm going to adjust one thing for everyone. We'll be back in 1 minute, everyone. Okay, so my next question to segue into what you're talking about is tell me a little bit about, because you were telling this story earlier about the Putney painters.
Yeah.
And how you started incorporating them into the Western art world and trying to merge those two things together.
It was, one, I had a very good relationship with the education director at the school. And she was constantly looking for new people to come teach.
At Scottsdale Artist School.
Scottsdale Artist School. And so we started collaborating on, we'd sit down and dream up a list of artists that we would love to have come teach. And that kind of then developed into, well, so how do we convince so-and-so to come teach at the school? What if we have them do a demo at the gallery? And I came up with the idea of, we'll charge $25 and you can come watch a great artist do a demo, and then all the money goes to the school. And then I got the gallery to go along with that idea as a nice fundraiser. And then it became, well, if I'm going to invite all these great artists to come to the school, why not ask them to give us a couple paintings? And we'll put them on display at the gallery and see if we can sell some artwork for the artist. And the first one we did was Richard Schmid and Nancy Guzik and the Putney Painters. And the whole idea was bring the Putney Painters out west. Most of the artists had never had any type of, Richard had, but not most of them hadn't done a lot in the West. And put on an exhibition. And I remember the comment was, well, they're not all professional artists, and I love that. I love the idea of having a Richard Schmid painting here and somebody that might be just starting, or, that obviously Richard saw something in them. Sometimes it wasn't the painting, sometimes it was the person.
Yeah.
He was that giving that just rubbing shoulders with people was important to him.
Yeah.
And so, all the art magazines fell all over the idea of Putney Painters head west or Putney Painters come to Scottsdale. But we had 5 of them teach workshops at the school. It became Putney Painters Week, and then we had 1 of them or 2 of them every night do demos. And then we did a show and sold artwork. And it was incredibly successful for the school and for the gallery. And it never hurts to have a couple Richard Schmid paintings to sell,
Right.
which he was gracious enough to give us. And I still remember the people that bought Nancy's paintings. They became long-term friends, and they bought other art from me. And so win-win-win. We did it a second year with them, and had just as much success, if not more. And through those relationships, I started representing Daniel Keyes, started representing Kathy Anderson, started representing Stephanie Birdsall, and so not only was it a one-time thing, it became relationships that still exist today.
Right, yeah.
Which is great. The third year, we decided to do it with David LaFell and Sherry McGraw and their painting group.
Yeah.
And in so doing it, we also asked them to extend an invitation to Raymond Kinsler and to Bert Silverman and Max Ginsberg, who also participated. And, from a gallery standpoint, it certainly doesn't hurt you to have Raymond Kinsler paintings on the wall.
Yeah.
And I got to know Peggy that way, and it was fun. And then we did it again the next year, and that's where I met Rose Franson for the first time, because she was invited to come do it. And I also learned that we could sell more than just Western art, and that was important in that time frame. And my thought was, it's not enough to be the best Western art gallery.
Right.
Let's be the best gallery in the West,
right,
in the Western United States. That was always my goal. And, and I knew who I thought was really good. I love Gallery 1261, and Arcadia made the move out, and now they're back. But I knew who were attracting the best artists. And I wanted to be that magnet as well. And
a cool thing that, like, hearing you talk about it, though, I think you discovered something that I don't know if a lot of other people in the gallery world were discovering, which is find the really well-known, really good painters that care and have a heart to teach, and ask them who they are interested in, and because they're in the trenches trying to help the next generation launch their careers. And so I feel like I'm hearing that over and over again, because you have, you said Kinsler, and you've got the whole Putney painter group, and with Schmidt, and who else did you say? Graves. And so like all of these different people had their own little groups that they were nurturing, which is like amazing, and like you tapped into something that I think.
And then I even made the next leap is, so what painting organizations are important to them?
Right.
Like the Portrait Society.
Right.
They all supported the Portrait Society, so I should know something about I didn't know anything about the Portrait Society.
Yeah. That's where I originally met you.
Yeah. So then the other thing that over time I realized is I could go into a workshop at Scottsdale, and yes, try to influence who came to teach, but I could also then look to see what's going on with the participants, the students. And I would walk around in a workshop, and it got to the point where I spent 3 days at least every morning at the school before I'd go into the gallery. And the school put up with it because I was one of them, I guess. And I would go into a workshop. I'd walk in, I think I mentioned earlier today, I walked into Mike Malm's. He was a good friend. I'd known him since college. He was represented by Trailside. He was teaching a workshop, and I'm walking around looking at all the students' art, and stop dead in my tracks in front of one easel and look at him and say, "Who is this?" And then he just whispered to me, "She's 16. Now, my heart goes into whatever flutter you want to talk about when I hear things like that. And it's not so much, I just love finding new artists. And so I met...
Explain what you mean by new artists.
Well, a new artist can be a 64-year-old architect who has spent a wonderful career designing buildings or designing heating ducts or whatever they do, who at some point in time finally gets to that spot in their life where they can step back and say, I really want to just create. I really want to try being a painter. I want to draw. I want to do, and I've met people who were in advertising. I've met interior designers. I've met, there's a lot of moms out there who put aside a lot just to be moms and grandmas. But at some point in time, they just want to go back to their roots of being creative.
Yeah.
And so young artists to me can be 64, 74, or 14.
Yeah.
And I kind of treat them all the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that, well, one, it just blew me away coming out of the manufacturing world. I mean, I spent millions of dollars on patents, trademarks, and copyrights, and then protecting them or researching somebody else's to see if I could, and I just remember being immersed at that first year in Scottsdale and just dumbfounded that artists would show people what they did.
Yeah.
That is just so foreign from a business standpoint. It makes no logical sense to me whatsoever.
Yep.
Until you really understand that it's not like a patent.
Yep.
And they're not teaching somebody to copy them. Mm-hmm. That's the last thing they want. But they want that artist to learn one little tidbit that makes this jump from here to here and what that artist's understanding and what they're doing is.
Yep.
But it was still just kind of blew me away that the first few demos I went to and the first few classes that and I remember sitting and watching Scott Christensen do something one time, and I'm just saying, Scott, why do you show everybody what you do? And but once I got over that business hurdle, I realized just how special the art world is because of that. And if you're going to have those mentor-mentee relationships from a gallery standpoint, why not look at both sides?
Yep.
Yes, I want Richard Schmidt's paintings in the gallery, but I don't mind at all. Years later, representing Daniel Keyes, who was heavily influenced by Richard, and especially on the professionalism side.
Yeah.
And so I found that if I spent my time looking at both, I would find people.
Yeah.
And it's fun for me. I don't know if I don't really like the word discover somebody. It's more promote somebody, or put them in a situation where they can flourish.
Yeah.
And
it is your own discovery. Not necessarily that you're discovering for the world, but you make a discovery that is exciting for you, and it gets you excited. And then all you want to do is shout it from the rooftops that there's this amazing person. And, having that kind of person advocate for the artist, like you're the best kind of gallery operator in the sense that you went into it with a pure passion. There was you had your former business training, right? Mm-hmm. And the business training helped. But what really sells the art is how excited you are about the people that you see, And
then what I thrive on is how excited the people are that are buying it.
Yeah, right.
It's that magical moment of the right piece at the right time for the right person. Mm-hmm. And I get to see that confluence all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's so fun. And it's like, I love talking to an artist after the fact and said, how did you know that you were painting for that person? Because it's that personal sometimes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of art that's sold as investment. And I applaud that too. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that, we're in a business, or if you want to, we are in a business where there's an asset value, mm-hmm. where there's something that has longevity, or else, look at all the great paintings going back centuries and centuries and centuries. They're valuable because somebody deems them valuable. Right. And I love the fact that the art being created here at East Oak Studio today is going to have some value 100 years from now.
Yeah.
I think it will, because That's one of the reasons I'm here, is because some of the people you're working with, we're gonna know them all
Yeah.
10 years from now, 20 years from now, and that's exciting, and that's the role. And to be blunt, I love seeing checks go out to artists from galleries.
Yeah.
I mean, I hear galleries all the time complaining about having to this expense and that expense. I mean, the funnest thing in the world is seeing a stack of checks going out to artists on paintings that have been sold.
Yeah.
Every year I do a dump, and I look through the artists that I've associate with, and I'm thinking, okay, I paid him X number of dollars this year, I made her this X number of dollars, and then I try to figure out in my own mind, okay, so he's got this gallery over here, she's got this one over here, are they selling the same amount or lesser? In my own mind, I'm actually kind of being there, I don't know, maybe it's the dad in me. It's like, are they making a living at this?
Yeah.
And if not, what can I do to make it happen?
Right.
And so.
Speaking of like what you're talking about, like the real heart behind the vision of even starting East Oaks was that the odds of any single artist, talented or not, becoming somebody that would transcend the art history and be a part of history in the future in books is probably slim to none on the drop of a bucket of one artist. But my passion and thought of East Oaks, like when we collaborated together to build it, was, well, maybe we are, and maybe we will, or maybe we won't. But if we can influence 5 people, and they can influence 5 people, and they can influence 5 people, inevitably part of our influence and our time spent nurturing the next generation, inevitably one of those people is going to change the entire art world and be in the history books and influence the world. And we have a much better opportunity to do that. And but it takes us, it takes you and your kind of expertise in what you do and having the same passion to make all of that happen. So that part is very exciting to me. I wanted to go into speaking of, because really what we're all about here is launching the next generation of artists' careers. It's kind of talking or asking a couple of questions on sort of 3 phases of an artist as they sort of are going through, and talking a little bit about, I don't know, the dynamics of it. So like, if you were to say, what are the 5 goals you should set as an artist who's been trained but is starting to try to actually create poetry and create real art for galleries or just the world? What are the like 5 goals for the launching artist? What are like the 5 goals of a person who's been showing and done a lot of group shows that can help them push towards having like a solo show or whatever the next stage is that you feel would be best for their success? And then we're going to talk also about the idea of going to auctions and what would be the like 5 goals for that kind of artist to launch himself into possibly being in museums, and what does it take to go there? So what are your thoughts on the first one?
Well, on the first one, it all comes down to the art. I mean, in reality, I hope I've been in an industry that understands quality. I think part of the art world doesn't. And it's all about who the dealer is. It's all about who's hyping what. And I don't have a place for that. I think, I look at it that, the art has to make a statement. And it has to make your statement, not somebody else's statement. And I think in that first group, as you're just, it's so important that you're getting the instruction that you need, whether it's online, whether it's in a setting like this, whether it's wherever, whether it's a personal mentor, whether it's, I mean, my whole influence of when I was a teenager and in college, it was one guy teaching me how to do watercolor. Well, when I go to see William Matthews' watercolor exhibition at the Scottsdale Museum of the West yesterday, I went through that whole retrospect thinking of my mentor and what he would have to say about Willie's paintings. And I just love that idea. But that first group, I'll tell you one thing. I've been following art since the 1980s, been selling it for almost 20 years now. There's never, in my opinion, been a time when there's as many resources out there for artists to learn how to be artists.
Yeah.
And I also think, I truly believe there's more good art being produced now than ever.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
It's not even close, especially in the representational world. I mean, I went to college in the 70s and the 80s. We all know in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, representational art was the last thing you wanted to teach at a university level. It was all modern and the abstract and all that. And, I think I fell into my love of Western art because it was one place where those artists could paint representationally. You could paint, you could paint cowboys, you could paint Indians, and you could paint wildlife. You could paint horses, and you could paint them like they looked.
Right.
And so a lot of the illustrators went that way. And I had this conversation with Eric Rhodes and Peter Trippi a number of times that realism, representational art, whatever you want to, had two benefactors during that time period, Western art and religious art. The third would be commissioned portraiture.
Yep.
And thank goodness that people still wanted to have paintings that looked like them.
Yep.
But outside of that, you really couldn't find it. And so that's where my love came from. But I don't want to go off on too big of a tangent, but there is so much available right now. But I think the second thing that I see that's happening that is so, so very important is that the second you get the confidence level of an artist, you need to start giving back too. And I think it happens sooner and sooner and sooner now because the base is there quicker.
Yep.
And the camaraderie, if you want to call it that, getting together, painting together, critiquing each other. I know being an artist, the pandemic showed us just how lonely being an artist is.
Yeah.
But we live in a society now that we can feed off each other so easily. And I think that's one of the reasons that exponentially the quality of the art's going to just continue to blossom is because there's so many more opportunities for artists to interact and learn from each other. And,
I totally agree.
And I think that, and what's interesting is if I was to say all three of those groups, if you will, that you mentioned, I look for people who teach. Because to me, that's kind of the litmus test. Are they giving back, one? But two, I think it makes them better artists.
I totally agree.
To rub shoulders with people who are learning, who are as good as they are, and maybe in some aspects what they aspire to be. And that's why I put so much effort into, I wanted to come here because I see something magical happening here. I see it on social media all the time. I hop on some of your little webcasts and just watch and listen. And I can see the quality. And that excites me. And there are others. I went to Jeff Hines' atelier, and boy, there's some good artists there. And I was with Daniel Keys and Richie Carter and Tim Reese at their palette project over the weekend where Scottsdale Artist School gives, this year it was 23 students between the ages of 17 and 22. And to have 2.5 days to rub shoulders with those quality of artists. And but walking around, there's one that I'm going to get some paintings from.
Yeah.
And that's exciting. And but I read something, I think it was out of Artsy. I think artists need to understand galleries are pretty lazy, in my opinion. They don't do what we're talking about
Right.
for the most part. A lot of times they wait to see who's selling where, and if they sell enough, they try to get
Yep.
a part of the
Jump
pie.
on that, yeah.
You know, but Artsy did a survey of galleries, and they said, "What's your number one source of your new artists?" And it was, I think, correct. The answer was other artists. And so I know I have made a career of watching who's being mentored by whom, who's hanging out together. I go to the extent I love to me, the best part of social media is not necessarily the posts that I read. It's watching the interaction of artists on social media.
Yeah.
That means reading comments. Now, if somebody told me other galleries are out there reading comments, I'd scoff at the idea. I love reading the comments because I want to see who's responding to what. And as a new artist in this first group you mentioned, one of the key things is to develop that kind of a network with other artists so somebody like me can see that, oh, here's an artist I respect in group number 2, and he's constantly saying nice things about this artist. I watch that kind of stuff, and it's just become second nature. And then I love to comment too, and it's fun seeing. I love getting comments from, artists that somebody bought something because I posted something on social media or made a comment, or a gallery calls me and says, "Thanks, so and so came in and said they saw this piece on your Instagram page, appreciate it. What do we owe you?" And I always say, "You don't owe me anything. This is what I want to do." Is just be a facilitator. And to me, that's what's great about social media. There's a lot of, I think artists rely way too much on social media, thinking it's the answer to everything.
Right.
And tomorrow I want to talk a lot about that.
Yeah.
Because artists are entrepreneurs. They have to run their business like a businessman.
Yep.
And they can't just post something out on Instagram and figure, okay, I've done my marketing for the day. That's just, it doesn't cut it. It's a start, but there's more to it.
To add to exactly what you're saying, I think that what I often say is business is relationships, and it's all about relationships. And sometimes social media can give you a false sense of relationship with it, that like if people are liking things, and you have like this huge following, that you think you've got relationships. But it's more about like you said, the interaction, which I need to put a shout out and commend Chelsea Lang, who also will be coming this evening. You'll meet her, but started a Discord group based off and called it Putney Prodigies. And all the people that you probably know get on there, and it's just a group of artists who feel safe to be able to post whatever they're working on and get encouragement from all these other artists. And it's a lot of the names like Kyle Ma and those kind of people, and Tina Figuarelli, who's becoming an awesome name we're so proud of. So
I'm a collector.
Exactly, see? So, but that's the kind of community that is really working, and like you said, it's all about the relationships. So, speaking of relationships, how do you feel about artists, and how would you encourage artists to develop relationships with collectors? How do you start that initial thing? Say they don't have the Scott Jones to help them with that.
Artists ask me all the time, do I need a gallery? Let's start there.
Okay.
A good gallery can create those relationships.
That's awesome.
A good gallery needs to create those relationships, but there are plenty of galleries that don't. I mean, it's that relationship between artist and collector. They're the middleman, and they guard, and they.
I was about to say, what do you think about the ethics of that?
And the ethics of it, to me, social media has changed everything. The days of hiding who buys art from an artist, that should have gone out of the window 10 years ago, longer. But I find that people who become collectors want to know the artist. And one of the reasons I like to come out on the East Coast is I think it's very different than the West in one really important respect. I was on a panel one time at with Fine Art Connoisseur with Peter Trippi and the museum directors of several museums. And I brought up the fact that the museums out west sell art. And by selling art, they are putting the artist and the collectors together without a middleman.
Wow.
And these museum directors just poo-pooed the whole thing and said they aren't real museums. And I just said, so the Charlie Russell Museum, the Autry Museum, I went through a list of these places. They're not real museums. No, because they sell art. That's not what we do. That's a whole other topic. But in my world, there's plenty of different avenues for an artist to get to know who's buying their art. And a gallery that's standing in the way of that is not your partner.
Yeah.
That's pretty harsh, but it's the way I feel.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can walk around my house. I know every single artist except one, personally, of a painting that I really like that's on my wall. And every time I walk past this little painting, it bugs the whatever out of me that I've never met him.
Yeah.
It's the one exception. And yeah, I've read all his bios and blah, blah, blah. I have never met him. Every other artist I have met. And that's important to me. And I'm finding it's important to, it's the one thing that kind of takes art out of being just an investment and being something that you love.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for the artist, that it's not, the whole art business isn't on the fact that, you know, a show at Legacy did $3 million. It's that he got to meet these people that were buying it.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, even back to this first group you mentioned, it is so important that these artists, and I hear it all the time, oh, I'm not very good at selling my own art. You have to become comfortable talking about yourself as an artist. Or you're going to limit.
Yep.
It doesn't mean you can't,
Right.
you know, find just the right agent or just the right gallery that just does it all for you and you can, but to make that next step and then certainly that third step, you have to be comfortable selling yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing. That's what we all do in any profession. But it's just a whole lot more obvious when you're a creative type and, you know, you stick something on the wall for everything to see and then you have to explain why you did it the way you did it or what it means, you know, and
which can be quite vulnerable for artists. But that's
it can be vulnerable.
You know? Yeah.
But it's that vulnerability that makes it collectible.
Yeah.
In my opinion. And I think one thing that artists sometimes forget is they sell a piece to somebody, they celebrate, they take themselves out to dinner, they're happy. They don't realize that the reality of being successful means how do I cultivate that relationship and they buy a second one and a third one and a fourth one.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the key to this whole thing. And it's also the key to the gallery too.
Yep.
That the gallery have the perception that I'm not selling just one piece.
Yeah.
I want to sell them 4 pieces. And that 4 pieces might be over 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, the first wildlife artist that I started buying, I got into a situation where I love his work. I still do. I bought one every other year. But part of it was I loved watching the progression. Mm-hmm. And I loved 10 years later taking back the first one I bought to him because there was a little chip of paint up in the sky that had fallen off. And I said, can you just touch this thing up? And he just looked at me and he says, you bought this? You know, and I said, yeah. And he says, I was horrible in 1994. And then he just told me everything that was wrong, you know. And I said, I know this painting's not like this one. But part of the joy is watching I can go into one room in my house and see 12 years of your progression as an artist in 6 different paintings. And people who appreciate art, there are plenty of them out there that can do just that.
You know, one of the most valuable lessons as an artist when I was first getting started is I had a sort of a family friend of a friend, you know, just like once removed from us that wanted their 5, at the time they only had 2 kids, but ultimately ended up having 5 over a course of time. And they commissioned me to do all of those portraits. And when I first started, I was about 19, 20. And then I ended up like having a career for a little while, and then went to GCA, Grand Central Atelier, and studied under Jacob, and then got out of there, and then did their last 2 or 3 children. And the progression was over a course of about 11, 12 years, same thing. And like you could look back, and I remember just being like, seeing them in their home and kind of almost being like, oh, and they go, actually, we absolutely said the same thing you're saying. We absolutely we hold dear the value of seeing the progression of your journey as a career, because we invested in your story and we're seeing the fruition of your story. Yep. And so for artists out there, as an encouragement, don't be fearful that your work is not good enough, because there's somebody out there who wants to have the artist before they were known. The most expensive painting that Picasso ever sold was one of his early works in his like Rose series, because there's only very few of them. Yep. It was before he became famous, and they're very rare. Yep. So like, it's just a great encouragement to hear you say that.
And it's interesting. I was just about to ask you, because I don't do a lot in the commission, portraiture world. Yeah. I mean, I sometimes play the middleman, but that's not a big focus of mine, because there are people out there who do. But it would seem to me that the same logic applies. You want to do mom and dad and the kids and the grandkids, and over a period of time, you become the go-to person. I'm now a grandpa, and so I've kind of started a thing that when my grandchildren are around 6 months old, I want somebody to do a drawing with them. And I'm torn between having the same artist do them all.
Right, yeah.
But there's also the benefactor, I don't know, the part of me that just loves getting a great drawing from somebody and then putting it out on social media that I commissioned so-and-so to do my granddaughter, and it ends up being the best thing ever for that artist.
That's awesome.
And generates a bunch of other commissions for them. So I try to spread it around a little bit. But in my mind, I want that opportunity, but I think artists kind of shortchange that relationship with the collector. Sometimes they shy away from it. And that's why I'm such an advocate of, once you've got somebody on your email list, your buying list, you cultivate that. Yep. And you do it every month. Yep. You want to become part of their lives. They might go 2 years, there might be something that happens, their kids are in college, they can't afford to buy something, but you want them seeing what you're doing that entire time, and then all of a sudden their kid graduates and they have some money to start buying art again. And who do you want them to come? Do you want them to find somebody brand new, or, oh yeah, let's go back and look and see what, so-and-so was doing. Yeah. And so a lot has changed, but I think a lot still, I appreciate the artists that reach out to me every month. Yeah. I did a little test at the Portrait Society one year. They asked me to speak. And since I did it 2 years in a row, I did a little test and mentioned to people that how important it was to do a newsletter. And this is the type of things, I think there's some things that every newsletter should have. And I went through all that whatever. After the Portrait Society was over, I went out and made up a Gmail account so that people wouldn't know it was me. and signed up for 200 artist newsletters from people that I had met at the Portrait Society, and then kept track of how many of them actually sent me something. It was abysmal.
Oh, I'm sure.
It was just horrible. So the next year when I was asked to speak, I gave the results. And I said, you know, over half of the people that I signed up for never sent me a thing. And I said, I can put on two hands the number that sent me something every month like I had suggested. And I was really disappointed because somebody signs up to follow what you're doing, they're gold.
Yeah.
You don't know anything about them necessarily, but until you know otherwise, you got to treat them that way.
This is such a good lesson because I think there's a lot of artists out there that are just scared that they don't want to inundate someone's email all the time with stuff, but it's not about the frequency of what you send them, it's the quality of what you end up sending them that's more important. And it's actually funny because you were talking about the sort of the three things, and I know that this is a little bit of what you're going to talk about tomorrow, but this is just to give everybody a little bit of taste. I would love for you to at least say the three things that you think, because they're so simple, but they're so good, and it doesn't take long to make these three things happen. Can you tell me the three things you would expect to have in
the three things I
emails?
love to see, and it can be a very short email, but I love to have three things. One, I want something in that email that's available for me to buy. And it doesn't have to be a sales pitch. But it's something that you just put out to the world that this is now available and where. It could be at a gallery, it could be something that you're in your own personal, it could be going to a show, but something in that newsletter that as a collector I can go, ooh, I want that. Ooh, I would like to have that. That's number one. And sometimes that should be maybe number three in the thing, but there's something to buy. You're offering something. The other thing is I want to see examples of what you're working on. And I want the anticipation factor that I want to open your email next month. And I know some artists that refuse to put works in process out in progress and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's some reasons for that. But in a newsletter, you can explain that it's a work in progress. And I love knowing what projects you're working on. And if you've got a show coming up, I want to know that you've got a show coming up 6 months from now. Because in my mind, I'm making a mental note, oh, there's going to be some inventory available.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss that. So I want to, one, you're investing that person in what I'm doing now. You make something that's available right now. And then the third component to me that is equally, if not even more important, I want some little tidbit of information about you. What is it how do I become enamored with you as a person, as a creator?
You're buying
I'm buying
into their
them.
story.
Yeah.
You want to know part of their
And
story.
so if you went to a Sargent show in Boston, I want to know about it.
Yeah.
And you don't have to flood, you can flood social media with it, but, say something about the favorite painting that you saw. Or if you went with another artist, who you went with. Or who you ran into. Just some little glimpse into your life as an artist that makes me want to help.
Yeah.
And also helps me take a peek into, are you driven to really, to me, part of this whole thing is I love artists that I know I'm going to be glad I met 20 years from now.
Yeah.
That this just isn't a whim. This isn't just a hobby. I want to see the passion.
Yeah.
And sometimes the passion is really easy. It's just, when you're not creating your own art, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And it could be a hike in the Great Smoky Mountains looking for reference material for that next great landscape that you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
But tell me that's what you love doing. I just want to know that. So those three things are the things that, I think should be in every little newsletter that you send out.
Ted Meanoff once said, somebody, if you want to be successful, you need to, and it's a great just slogan because it helps you remember it, but he would say you need to collect collectors. And that always sounds a little dry to me because you don't want it to sound like you're just like trying to hoard these collectors. But what you're describing is exactly, you want to nurture and cultivate the relationships with collectors, because largely there's a small percentage of people out there that actually love exactly what we do, that buy probably the majority of the work. It's like the 20%, 80% rule, and they want to invest in the people that they want to invest in their story. And that makes the work even more valuable to them, because there's a lot of people out there that are very talented. Why do they want to invest in you? And so doing the email list like that is one of the ways.
And I have two follow-up thoughts. Tina and I have talked about this, but I have one artist. I own 5 of her paintings now. She puts her newsletter out on the first day of every month. And for the 15 years she's been doing it with me, I can set my calendar knowing on the first day of the month I'm going to get an update from her. A few years ago, she missed a day. I reached out to her to see if she was okay. It was that obvious. It was just...
Wow.
And I'm not saying that you need to do that as an artist.
Right.
But at the same time, if I go months and not hear anything from an artist, do you lose interest? Then let me just say something too. And this is part of that relationship business. An artist should never show their disappointment to a collector if they don't buy something. The last thing you want to do is make somebody feel guilty or whatever, because you don't know as an artist what's going on in their personal life at any given time. And you might think this is the greatest thing that you've ever done and this is the right person to buy it. And I've seen some relationships end because you're never owed anything from a collector, I guess is the way I look at it. I think, collecting collectors means you're always on the positive side. You're always pushing positives. I've seen many situations where an artist makes somebody feel terrible because they didn't buy something.
Wow.
That can sever a relationship. And I think, be disappointed, but don't be disappointed to the point where you've hurt that relationship with the collector.
Man, that's so interesting, because I have on here, what are some of the don'ts that people should do as artists, or that we should consider while building our career? And that is a really good, solid don't.
Well, you
Do you have any more don'ts?
Don't badmouth other artists.
Oh.
If you're invited to a show or a group show, go in with the intent that you're going to sell somebody else's art to somebody that you talk to.
That's beautiful.
It gets noticed. The last thing you want to do as an artist is see somebody over looking at another artist painting and go over and grab them by the elbow and pull them over in front of yours. You need to find joy in other people's success. And you talk about what endears you to a gallery. Let's say you're in that second group and you've now got a gallery or 2 or 3. There's 2 things that endear you to a gallery. One is your ability at an event where they're putting you up on the wall. That one, you can talk about your own art. But I watch all the time to see how you react with people about other people's art. Because collectors will ask, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? I really like this. This is what I like. They're looking for validation that what they like is good. And I'm not saying not be honest, but I'm saying not be harsh. You don't downgrade this so that you hope you can sell yours.
And there's something good in everything that you can pull out and find to say.
And I've actually let a few artists go because they have said things in shows to people that I thought was totally inappropriate. And so I watch those things, And I think that is so important that once you're given that opportunity. I think the other thing I'd mention in that second group that I think is really important for the artists themselves is when a gallery steps up and wants to represent you, I tell artists to think of that spot on the wall as your real estate. And what do I need to do as an artist to keep my paintings there? And once I've been allocated that little, whether it's 6 feet or 12 feet or whatever else, one of the things that I find that artists do that is a definite don't is don't walk into a gallery and complain because one of your paintings is in the back room. There is nothing that irritates me more than... Now, I understand why somebody would send in a brother or a sister-in-law or something to see how their work's being displayed and whatnot. But I don't know how many times I've gotten calls from artists saying, so-and-so, our friend was in, and there's only 5 of my 6 paintings up. What's going on, Scott? And I think what artists need to understand, and this is my mentality, if I'm dedicating a certain amount of my wall space, which is valuable, I sell one of your paintings. Who do you want me to put up there?
Yeah.
Hers, his, or one of yours? And I also think artists totally underestimate the fact of how much we sell outside of the back room.
Yeah, right.
There's 2 factors
Even
there.
Even more so since the days of the internet.
Sometimes people think we're hiding the best stuff in the back. I'll have collectors come in and say, okay, so what's in the back room that you're not showing yet?
That's the Birkin bag. Are you familiar with the Birkin bag? Yeah.
And
it's in the back room.
People have that, or they think it's brand new. And brand new is always good. I mean, I have sold so many paintings that came in wet and leaned them against the wall and put a little sticky note above it, wet paint. People it's like, I don't know, it's the sun's gravity. Wet
Flies
paint,
to the flame.
it's boom, and there's things that you can do. I mean, this is a business. This is sales. I try to be totally upfront with everything. But if somebody assumes that a piece in the back is brand new, I'm not going to tell them necessarily that, it's in there because it's been there for a year. But what I guess what I want to, from a don't standpoint, is have an understanding with your gallery. Are they going to have a piece in the back room? That's fine. But understand what they're doing. Is it being pulled out every time that somebody sees the other 5 pieces on the wall? Why wouldn't I? I mean, I make sure my back room's clean enough. I know exactly where every piece is, so I can immediately go grab it. Oh, I want you to see this one too. And I walk in, take something off the wall, put it up. And if something sells, your piece goes up. So there are some things that you can do that, you think are kind of innocent, but can damage those relationships.
Yeah. How many, speaking of this sort of tier 2, how many galleries do you feel is sustainable for an artist, both like financially, but also for the amount that they create and not to like get overwhelmed?
Well, and I think that's the factor that is so individual for each artist. I think the best thing that you can do with a gallery or a group of galleries is, I think they referred to it in my MBA program as a realistic job preview. If you're interviewing somebody for a job, tell them what it's really like. You're going to get the best employees if they know what they're getting into when they come aboard. I've always tried to do that. It's how do I, if I need... The first thing I always identify with an artist is, are we doing just one show for you? Or are we doing this on an ongoing basis? There's kind of 2 different models. Sometimes they're just a show artist, and I do a show, and if it does well, I do a show for them again. And it's all based on, and I might join them with somebody else that I think have a two artist show that complements each other very well. Other artists, I look at them and I want them on the wall all the time. I want new pieces all the time. With that, it's, so can you get me 18 pieces this year? There are galleries that sign contracts that you will give us X number of pieces. I've never done that. I hate contracts.
Yeah.
I feel like a relationship with the gallery, you should be able to walk away as an artist anytime that you feel like you need to, and I should do the same as the gallery.
Yeah.
But there's certain things you have to make sure you get understood. That's that one, legally they're on consignment, that they're yours, not the gallery's, and what the commission percentages are, how far a gallery can discount without getting your approval. And how long does, I always work out with an artist right up front. If you send me a painting and then 2 months later you want it back, you're paying the shipping back.
Yeah.
But if I've had it for a year and you want it back, I pay the shipping. Just some sort of a timeline so everybody understands who's paying what. And, show expenses and advertising, how's that handled? Are we splitting it, gallery paying it all? All that needs to be, the do's and the don'ts. Let's make sure we at least, the last thing you want to know is get surprised by some gallery that discounts something 35% without you knowing it. And you're going, wait, what just happened? This check I got's totally unacceptable.
Yeah.
You don't want those kind of things. But to your point, it's just getting an understanding.
Right.
The days of having an exclusive gallery relationship with one gallery, there's a dozen artists in my sphere that can do that.
Right.
But only a dozen.
Yeah.
That can, where a gallery can sell everything they can produce. It's normally geographic in nature. That it's great to have if you've got a presence in Scottsdale, you want one in Santa Fe, and then you might want one on the East Coast, depending on what you're painting.
Yeah.
Or Montana, if they're into the West, And so I actually like talking with my artists about what they're doing with their other galleries. And who are they talking to? Who can I refer you to?
Yeah.
Because I want them to be a success. If they need to sell 50 paintings this year to be financially solvent as an artist, how do I make sure that happens? That might not be just me. They might need 2 other galleries to do that. And hopefully they can paint 50 paintings.
Yeah.
I mean, every artist is so different. I've got some artists that knocking out 100 paintings a year is not a big deal. I've got some that doing 10 is excruciating.
Yeah.
And
so true. Depending on how big they are and how small they are,
how complicated.
What about that next level? Like, you've seen and experienced several people, probably Mark Maggiore being one of them, where you've seen them go from probably not known as an artist to very known to the point at which he's selling at auction. What do you think are like a couple of the steps that would get you to that point? And what are your thoughts of the auction house that people should be aware of, both the pros and cons of just knowing that world?
I think, one, I mentioned it just briefly, how different the museums are. The museums and the auction houses become very convoluted in a way. In the Western world, they're one and the same. I mean, the Charlie Russell Museum's got an auction. The Autry Museum has an auction. And so it gets a little bit convoluted. I look at the auctions as the catalyst that can really, really burn the embers on pricing moving up. And the fact that AskArt and other places have all the auction records has made art very much like real estate, in that you have a constant stream of comparables.
Yeah, because it becomes a public record.
It's a public record.
Helps appraisal.
And if I am an astute collector and I'm looking for a Joseph Sharp painting, I can go out and see hundreds of auction records over the last 10 years. I can compare that painting to the one I'm thinking of buying, to others that have, and I get a really nice feel for what it's worth. It's how the auctions set the estimates, is based on prior sales. Most of the big auctions nowadays, they don't take chances on living artists. If they ask somebody like a Mark Maggiore or a Jeremy Lipking or somebody to do a painting, it's because they've already proven that they can sell everything that they can paint. So the auction is actually becomes a vehicle for that artist to drive their prices further up.
Okay, so it's more of like they've shown incredible track record, and then that's the next stage of
so they got to the point where in category number 2, they've already busted. You know, they've done everything they can do in category number 2. And then what's made Legacy so successful is they create their own auction atmosphere in a show. I mean, Thursday night, Don Olsey, who a lot of people don't know, young Montana artist, did a show of, I think, 14 paintings at Legacy, and they auctioned off 8 of them and sold the rest by draw. This is another thing that the Western world does that other galleries need to learn a little secret from, is if you get a hot artist to the point where you as a gallery don't want to decide who gets what, is you
create a draw.
You create a draw where you set a price. I mean, I put my name in on a Don Olsey painting, and I was willing to pay whatever it was, $7,800 for this painting. So my name goes in a box along with 100 other people who are willing to pay $7,800 for this painting. And they, that night, draw a name out and they get to buy it for that. At the exact same time, the gallery's got, I think it was 8 other paintings that they don't do it that way. They did an online auction over 3 days. I know the top painting went for $65,000 at auction, and it was a $22,000 retail. So 3 times retail. And so in that setting, Don, who's a solid member of this number 2 group, as you described it, just busted out. Every auction wants him. So they'll ask him to do a new painting. People who bought his artwork previously will think, oh, his work's, I bought this 3 years ago for this, I'm going to make some money. So some of them will sell. That'll feed it even some more.
Which is really interesting because most of the time auction houses is done in the secondary market, not the primary. And so the artist is actually benefiting to a degree doing it this way in the primary market, which is wonderful because often artists are left out of that, in the secondary market.
And, we were very careful at the Scottsdale Art Auction which artists we asked to do a painting. I mean, the last thing you want to do is have one pass or not sell for over retail. So it's all about promoting the artist and pushing. I mean, it's to everybody's benefit. The prices keep going up over the years. The collectors feel good about it. The artist makes more money. The gallery makes more money. Shouldn't be the total focus, but it's an important one. Especially when you get to the point where supply and demand become that there aren't paintings available. And I think that's, let me just say it, going back to that question about, how many galleries do you need or how many, commitments and how many, one of the things that I think everybody should keep in mind is the illusion, not maybe the illusion, but scarcity is not a bad thing. The feeling that it's a privilege to have the opportunity to buy one of your paintings. And that it's not easy to come up with that, that your work is out there and it's in demand, and I think it all feeds right back into the whole email, social media, and everything else, that I'm keeping a close eye on what you're doing, because when that opportunity comes, I want to jump on it.
Yep.
Because it's not there every day.
Right. Right.
And you want the feeling out there that there's not too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how you do that, I mean, it at least needs to be talked about.
Yeah. I actually think that's a whole nother.
It is
Get a whole nother conversation
because
later
it's
on,
a really
just
nice
scarcity.
problem to have.
Yes.
It's a really nice problem to have. Let's
Yep.
put it that way. But can an artist do too many shows in a too short of a time? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet that's true too.
I mean, it can be like, oh, well,
In a way, it's law of diminishing returns.
they did a show so-and-so 2 months ago. Now they did another one. Now they're doing a third. How are they doing so many?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and you need, again, you're an entrepreneur. You just have to handle the message.
Well, Scott, this has been incredible. We could go all day. If you ever come and visit us on one of these things, we get to have Scott all day. And it's going to be so much fun. We're going to be asking so many questions throughout the rest of the day. We just want to say thank you for coming.
Well,
this is truly out of the generosity of his heart that he's here. He was in Scottsdale just last week. He took a red eye to get here. He's going to be also visiting Alia Erbelmani and also Scott and Susan Lyon, Scott Burdick and Susan Lyon. And we're just one leg, and we deeply appreciate you being here. Tomorrow we'll be doing we actually do want to do a few question and answers. If anyone has any questions, has anyone put anything? Okay, great. We'll do that next time. Scott, tomorrow will be doing a lecture on sort of the fundamentals of business and establishing yourself as an artist that is going to be on our subscription platform. We are so excited. We'll be releasing that next month. And after, we're going to do a little bit of editing on it, and it will be also, I think we'll have a few people to ask questions on there as well. But yet again, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you can come every year. This is just fabulous.
I think just so you know, I got asked a question. I don't even think we mentioned it. I used to work for Fine Art Connoisseur. I was their associate publisher and Plein Air magazine and whatever not. And I got asked by somebody within their organization, because they know I'm kind of making this tour and going around talking with different ateliers and schools and everything else. And the question I got just before I left was, so how do we help them more? I love that. That's, I want the major publications, the people that thrive off the buying and selling and creation of art, to understand that what you're doing at East Oak Studio is an important cog in that. And so I plan on, when I'm getting back, after I visited a few, trying to see if I can get them or somebody else to do a lot more than what they do in support of what the purpose is and what you're doing and how we all are benefiting from that. I look forward to that.
Yeah, well, that's such an honor. And the girls that are here, I know, are going to absolutely appreciate everything you have to say. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Scott, for being here. And if anyone wants to be a part of our email list, just go to East Oak Studio and sign up there. We have a place where you can sign up for our email list. We're going to make sure that we're applying these exact same three things to our email list in the future. So, and without further ado, we're going to go ahead and call it a day. But thank y'all again, and we look forward to the next time.
Thanks.